Back here now on the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast to continue on from the start of yesterday's series. I didn't get a chance to change the title of this segment, obviously, because I didn't accurately type it in yesterday. Yesterday was the NFC North, but I had it in as the NFC East. So today, we're actually going to get to talking and dissecting this NFC East division and giving my predictions on how I believe the standings will play out in 2024. I think this one, a little bit like the NFC North, where it was a little bit dicey to get through it in the middle portion of these rankings, but I think overall it wasn't too hard compared to other divisions that I will eventually get to in part of this series. So, to start off, at the number 4 spot, predicting who will finish last in this NFC East, I have the New York Giants. Just basically, it is a mess almost how this situation has turned with Daniel Jones, especially getting an inside look at it with Hard Knocks. I don't think that did them any favors at all with what went into the decision making and the reasons behind it all and just how it all fell apart, honestly. And now heading into this year in 2024 with so much expectations on Daniel Jones, and still it doesn't seem like he's turned that corner. You can't have your quarterback being sometimes the reason that you do lose games. Obviously, he's not at fault for every time they lose a game or something like that, but if it happens more often than not, more often than other reasons why you lose games, it can't be something that is connected to a winning team, a team that is a contending team. So compared to the other situations, I just think the Giants could struggle with that. The inconsistency from Daniel Jones, he is a good athlete. The arm strength is pretty much there, but it's the decision making, the telegraphing of passes that really has started to frustrate fans and the organization, it seems like, now heading into 2024. And also, just in terms of schedule, out of all the teams in the NFC East, the Giants have the toughest schedule compared to all these other teams in the division. So obviously, that's not something that benefits them too much. And the loss of Saquon obviously goes without saying. But also, the loss of Xavier McKinney on defense is another underrated loss that I was pretty confused about. So I think the Giants, it's just not really a year where you throw, if you were a betting man, a lot of money into the pot with the Giants winning this division. That's just how I see it. But moving on to the third team, we kind of got into this subject yesterday, but I decided to double down on it and predict that the Cowboys were going to finish third. Really, the biggest things that stand out to me with Dallas is the situation with Dak and his contract. It seems like he's pretty open to this year being the last year on the Dallas Cowboys for him, especially with CeeDee getting that extension before him. It makes it a little bit harder, or a lot bit harder, for them to also give Dak Prescott 58, 60 plus $million, especially being so close to the regular season. I feel like it's too short of a window to do that. So you can't have your quarterback on the last year of his deal and still expect, I think, better results. That's just me and how I view the contracts. And also, I mentioned the running game. They just signed Dalvin Cook. I think it was announced today or just late yesterday, but it doesn't really move me. It doesn't really move the needle to me. I'm actually going to talk about it more tomorrow in depth, but just overall, having Dalvin in there with Zeke doesn't really change my outlook on this running game, just because I think they took a step back with the talent that they have with the running backs available to them. And then also on the defensive side of the ball, you have a new defensive coordinator coming in, and you're missing Deron Bland for a good portion of the season. I don't really know, outside of Eric Kendricks, who their linebackers are going to be alongside him. Are you going to deploy Michael Parsons in there more? Are you going to keep him more as a pass rusher? I don't think he really benefits from doing both. So that's something they have to figure out. In terms of pass rushers also, they lost Dorrance Armstrong and Dante Fowler Jr., but you might look at a guy like DeMarcus Lawrence and say that, he's still there, obviously, but he has 10 sacks in the last 2 years, 6 in 2022, and he only recorded 4 last year. So you're going to need a little bit more than that alongside Micah Parsons for this defense to continue to produce at the level that they have been producing with Dan Quinn there. Now, obviously, he is gone. You bring in Mike Zimmer. How is that transition going to go? And similarly to the Giants, the Cowboys have the second toughest schedule of all the NFC East teams. They play 8 playoff teams from last year, so that's obviously going to be a challenge if you have, a bad running game or something like that. And also on the offensive side of the ball, you get CeeDee Lamb back in there. You guarantee him for the next 4 years, something like that. But outside of him, I still have questions with Brandon Cooks as a number 2. And then you have a guy like Jalen Tolbert, hasn't really stood out over the last few years. And also a guy like Kevontae Turpin. I don't think these guys scream ideal elite number 2 receivers alongside CeeDee Lamb. And I like Jake Ferguson. Jake Ferguson, their tight end, is a very capable and viable weapon for them, but you need more than that at the wide receiver position. Similarly to a team like the Steelers, right? You have George Pickens, you have CeeDee Lamb as your number 1s, but not a lot of people give the Steelers credit in that wide receiver room because of the lack of experience or relevancy from those other guys. So it is something that stands out, and I just feel like it's too much right now for the Cowboys to finish higher than number 2. So with that being said, the number 2 team that I predict to finish in the NFC East will be the Washington Commanders. And I might be buying in a lot on them. I might be buying a lot into their stock right now, but I just like the newness around this team. Similarly to the question I got from Antonio on the Bears, the Commanders are right there in making this quick switch, not only on the field, but in the organization, bringing in a new owner. I love Dan Quinn there as their head coach, their new general manager, Adam Peters, as well. They've really tried to flush all the negativity out of that building, out of that team, and bring in a lot of committed, good resume type of guys like Dan Quinn, like I said, their offensive coordinator, Cliff Kingsbury. He's had a good track record with mobile quarterbacks that he has had the privilege to coach, and that fits the bill with Jaden Daniels, right? Everything is going to revolve around Jaden Daniels. And just based off of what I've seen in the preseason, again, not taking too much into account with it, but just off of what everyone's saying in practice and the preseason, like I mentioned also, with Jaden, I feel like they really have something special with him, something they haven't had, honestly, since RG3, maybe Kirk Cousins, but to the level of MVP type of conversation, generational special quarterbacks. I think you get that with Jaden, and you haven't had it since RG3. But with all the good, obviously there are still some concerns, potentially with the wide receivers outside of Terry McLaurin. I just mentioned before in the previous segment that they added a guy like Noah Brown. I think that is an improvement, but again, it just doesn't do it fully for me. I feel like you need a more higher level guy, higher caliber guy than Noah Brown, Daimi Brown, or Luke McCaffrey. Those guys aren't awful by any means, but I just feel like with the level that you have with Jaden Daniels, he would definitely benefit a lot if you brought in somebody else. But they've added a lot just overall on all parts of this team. Their offensive line got better. Their running backs, adding Austin Eckler to Brian Robinson, is definitely an improvement. Their defensive line with Dorrance Armstrong, like I said, Dante Fowler Jr. Their linebackers with Bobby Wagner coming over as well. They definitely improved a lot. And it is interesting also with Dan Quinn, a familiar coach person just overall with that division. I think that's going to help a lot in being successful, knowing what works with certain teams and game planning, especially in how he prepares for the Cowboys, Giants, or Eagles. But I'm pretty high on the Commanders. I think they have a legitimate chance to finish second, but I just finished mentioning the Eagles, and that is who fills in that number 1 spot here. I do predict them to win this division, and I feel like they just have to do it, quite honestly, just because the level of talent that they have, how they crashed last year, and how it all turned pretty sour. You have those reports also of Nick Sirianni and Jalen Hurts sort of butting heads, and all the criticism fell on the coordinators. Their defense stunk in the last half of the year last year, so all of that wrapped up into now this year with how they've addressed almost all of it, bringing in 2 new coordinators, Kellen Moore and Vic Fangio, adding guys on the defensive side of the ball like Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, Devin White, drafting Quinyon Mitchell, Cooper DeJean, trading for a guy like Bryce Huff, and things of that nature. It's definitely something to get excited about. It's hard to predict a weak spot or just point my finger on something that is a resounding weakness of this team. It almost seems like they have everything. So with that being the case and the standard of the Philadelphia Eagles, the reputation that they've built over the last few years, and just how they're like basically on a revenge tour from last year, I think there is no question that they have to win this division. If they don't, depending on who finishes first, I think it would turn out pretty badly for Sirianni. A lot of people have him on the hot seat already, so I think not winning the division, especially in the type of manner they might lose it in, if that were to happen, he definitely could be one to lose his job over that. Again, you can't fall short of expectations with the type of team that you have, especially. So I feel like they're in a good position to do this. They actually have the easiest schedule in the entire division. They're tied for the 21st hardest division in the NFL, so that's going to benefit them a lot more. They only play 6 playoff teams from 2023, and I think Jalen Hurts, obviously their quarterback, is going to have a better year than he did last year. I think all the turmoil and the confusion with the offensive coordinator really hurt his chances, so now this year, I think he's going to come back with a vengeance, I really do, and recover from how he performed in 2023. But that does it for the rankings. That's how I predict the NFC East will turn out. Leave your guys' thoughts on if you agree with me, you think I'm completely wrong, you think the Cowboys are going to finish first. I saw someone predict the Cowboys finishing first, which is crazy. But, yeah, just leave your guys' thoughts on how you feel the NFC East will turn out in 2024. But we do have one more segment to get to, just updating you guys on any injuries and which players will start the year on the PUP list, meaning that they will miss the first 4 weeks of the regular season. Some pretty big names on there, so we're going to go through it and their impact and their absence on their teams with being on the PUP list to start 2024. So that is coming up in just a few seconds. We'll be right back.